Hello flight simmers, welcome to episode 4 of our Airbus beginner tutorial series. My name is Marty and I'll be your guide for today. On the last episode, we went through engine start, pushback, and taxi. Today, we'll be going through everybody's favorite, takeoff. Note that this is for absolute beginners only, hence this tutorial will be greatly simplified for the casual simmer. Let's get started. Right now we are still taxiing along taxiway Lima for runway 25 center in Frankfurt Flughafen Main, Frankfurt Airport for our flight to Hamburg. By the way, if you're wondering what flight stick I'm using for this flight, I have the link in the description box below. Also, don't forget to subscribe for more videos just like this one every single day. We are now approaching taxiway Lima 3, so we're gonna have to slow down before making a turn. A nice, gentle right turn for taxiway Lima 3, where we'll be holding short for runway 25 center. This is the last taxiway before we actually enter the runway. Setting parking brakes and taking time to contact tower for takeoff clearance.
Frankfurt Tower, Lufthansa 17, Lima 3 holding short 25 center, north departure takeoff clearance.
Lufthansa 17, clear for 25 center departure, wind 271, 3 knots.
Cleared for 25 center, Lufthansa 17.
Alright, we are now cleared for takeoff, going up to the overhead to turn the packs off. We need all that engine power for takeoff, so we're gonna have to sacrifice air conditioning for now until we've reached acceleration altitude. Going to the FCU to check if everything's in order. Also do the same for the flight instruments and the engine display. Everything looks good. And of course, the MCDU. These are our takeoff speeds: V1, VR, and V2. V1 is basically the do or die speed. As we accelerate down the runway, we reach a certain point wherein we're too fast to try to abort takeoff. Otherwise, we're going to overshoot the runway because we're going too fast. VR is the rotation speed or takeoff speed. Once we reach that speed, we're going to have to rotate or pull up for takeoff. Now, during takeoff, we don't pull up directly to a higher pitch angle, otherwise we're going to suffer a tail strike. What we need to do first is pitch up about 5 degrees, allow the airplane to lift off a bit, and then pull up some more for a pitch angle of about 15 degrees for the rest of the takeoff. V2 is the takeoff safety speed. This is the minimum speed that needs to be maintained all the way up to acceleration altitude, making sure that in case of an engine failure, we can make it back to the runway safely. This is also the speed where we can safely raise the landing gear. Going down, check if the speed brakes are armed, flaps set to 1, and trims set for takeoff. Alright, going up to the overhead, turn the strobe lights on, landing lights on, taxi lights to take off, and verify seatbelt signs are on. We can also make a cabin announcement because why not?
Flugbegleiter, bitte bereiten Sie sich auf die Abreise vor.
Parking brakes off, add a tiny bit of power. And make sure that the runway is clear. Also, look at the runway markings to verify you're on runway 25 center. You want to put the aircraft as close to the center line as possible. Make a full stop and prepare yourself for takeoff. set auto brakes to max. This is very important. In case of engine failure on takeoff roll, assuming you're still below V1, the aircraft will automatically hit the brakes once you retard the throttle to reverse thrust. I'm ready. Co-pilot's ready. Let's go. Bring the power up to 50% N1. Observe the engine spool up to 50% N1. And then push the throttle all the way forward to toga or full takeoff power. Man toga auto thrust blue. Now man means we're using manual thrust at the moment. Toga is short for takeoff go around, the maximum available thrust that the engines can ever give. And auto thrust in blue means auto thrust is armed. Also, while accelerating down the runway, you want to push the stick forward to hold the aircraft's nose down. This is because the engines in the Airbus are too powerful that upon acceleration, it tends to bring the nose up as it overcomes inertia. You may slowly bring the stick back to neutral as your speed reaches 100 knots. Alright, airspeed is alive. Knots. V1. Rotate. 5 degrees nose up. Lift off. And further nose up to 15 degrees for the climb. V2. Positive rate. Gear up. Taxi lights off. And speed brakes disarmed. Alright, we're gonna have to reduce our thrust to flex MCT, or maximum continuous thrust. Now instead of keeping full power throughout the entire climb, we reduce our thrust to flex MCT just to help reduce wear and tear on the engines. While doing so, bring your nose a tiny bit down to about 10 degrees. Observe your flight director, this green cross right here on your primary flight display. It seems now that it wants us to turn to the right, so we turn to the right. A nice, gentle 20-degree bank angle to the right. Just enough so we can smoothly follow the vector of our flight on the nav display. Also, be mindful of your attitude. You want to keep the nose up at 10 degrees for a steady climb. I want to bring the aircraft to wings level for now. Flaps up. Now if you look at your speed tape, you notice that your speed is increasing now that your flaps are up. At this point, I want to manually set the speed to 250 knots by pulling the speed knob on the FCU. On the Airbus, you can either push or pull the knobs on the FCU. Pushing the knobs in gives Autopilot full control over your aircraft as programmed on the MCDU. Pulling the knobs out allows you to control the Autopilot, so you can manually set speed, heading, altitude, and vertical speed by simply turning the knobs to whatever value you want. In this case, we want 250 knots. If the knobs are pushed in, means managed, Autopilot has full control over that. Dash lines will appear on the FCU display. Down cursor means pull, up cursor means push. Easy. For the meantime, I'd like to turn on the packs so that the passengers can have their air conditioning back. Now we just have to wait until we intercept the vector before making a turn to follow it. Fly your aircraft as close to the vector as possible, and please make your turns gentle. You don't want passengers to think Lufthansa is now a roller coaster, yeah? We are now approaching 10,000 feet, so I'm gonna go ahead and set the FCU to our cruising altitude of 26,000 feet. And gently fly the aircraft to intercept the vector using both nav display and the flight director as guides. Alright, right on the flight path, wings level, and we can now set autopilot on. I can now let go of the stick. I want the vertical speed to be at a steady climb of 2,000 feet per minute. And since we're already outside Frankfurt airspace, we can turn the landing lights off and increase our speed for the cruise. In this case, I want to go 340 knots. By the way, speed can be displayed in both Mach and knots with this button right here. I prefer knots, so. So now, all we can do is wait for the aircraft to fly itself up to cruising altitude. However, just because you're on autopilot doesn't mean you can only sit back and do nothing. We have to be very mindful of everything that's going on. Notice that the speed is only slowly increasing. So instead of adding power, we can just reduce our climb rate to about 1,200 feet per minute or whatever suits the situation. And now we're going faster. Note that a higher vertical speed will reduce your airspeed. If you notice your aircraft slowing down, just reduce your vertical speed. You can do this bit by bit, step by step, until you reach your cruising altitude. At this point, we can really just sit back and relax. And all we gotta do is just make necessary adjustments on the FCU and basically just observe everything that's going on and listen to ATC. On the next episode, we'll go through the approach phase and landing. This has been Marty, and I'll see you on the next episode.